rush to judgment. A Catholic teen is speaking out after a controversial video for March for Life attendees went viral. Doubling down. A Democrat senator is renewing her criticism of a judicial nominee for being a member of the Knights of Columbus. Clergy sex abuse. A report says the Vatican knew about the obscene behavior of a bishop who works at the Holy See. And praying with the Holy Father. Why Pope Francis pulled out his iPad yesterday during his weekly address. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, January 21st, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. The government shutdown is now in week 5, and Democrats and Republicans appear to be no closer to ending it than when it began. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has rejected President Trump's offer to give temporary relief to Dreamers in exchange for border security. White House correspondent Mark Irons has the latest. Mark?
Good evening, Wyatt. Catholic bishops urge both sides to reopen the government. President Trump blames Speaker Pelosi for the impasse, calling her radical and irrational for not accepting his offer. But the president can't seem to build support among other Democrats either.
Good morning, everybody.
President Trump making a quick visit to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial today. As frigid winds whip Washington, compromise to end the government shutdown seems completely frozen. The president attempting to sell his border wall idea to reluctant Democrats.
This is not a 2,000-mile concrete structure from sea to sea. These are steel barriers in high-priority locations.
The president's latest proposal, announced over the weekend, still has the $5.7 billion demand for border security, including a wall. But it adds 3 years of protection for both Dreamers, young migrants brought to the U.S. illegally as children, and TPS recipients, immigrants who fled natural disasters or violence to live in the U.S. The new proposals aren't impressing Democrats.
Unfortunately, the president keeps putting forward one-sided, ineffective remedies.
Democrats say they'll discuss border security if and when the president reopens the government, but the wall continues to be a deal breaker.
The president's turned it into a symbol of racism, which means that I think you're going to find very few Democrats support it.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is encouraged by the temporary relief offered to migrants in the president's plan, but would like to see them receive permanent protections. As for the president's border wall, the bishops describe it as a proposal that our brother bishops on both sides of the U.S. border with Mexico oppose. U.S. Catholic bishops have long advocated for comprehensive immigration reform that includes border security and protections for asylum seekers. They urge the president and lawmakers to end the shutdown. The president says he is not offering amnesty to migrants in his latest proposal, but says it could be included in a bigger immigration deal. Wyatt?
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thanks, Mark. Senator Kamala Harris announces her plans to run for president in 2020.
Let's do this together. Let's claim our future for ourselves.
The high-profile California Democrat is known for her rigorous questioning of President Trump's nominees. She recently asked a judicial candidate about his membership in the Knights of Columbus and whether it would prevent him from being an impartial judge. Now, those questions have sparked charges of anti-Catholic discrimination. Republican Senator Ben Sasse responded with a resolution approved unanimously by the Senate.
If a senator has a problem with this resolution, you're probably in the wrong line of work, because this is what America is. This is a super basic point: no religious tests. If someone has a problem with this resolution, what other parts of the Constitution are you against? Freedom of the press? Women's right to vote?
The resolution says it violates the Constitution to reject a nominee because of membership in the Knights of Columbus. Despite unanimous support of the measure, Senator Mazi Hirono, a Democrat from Hawaii, doubled down. She entered her objection into the congressional record. Senator Hirono says Senator Sasse sided with the alt-right. She adds the resolution is unnecessary because no religious test is being applied to nominees for federal office. A Catholic teen at the center of a national controversy says he did nothing wrong. Video of Nick Sandman and Nathan Phillips, a Native American man from Michigan, blew up on social media and sparked wide condemnation. But now, a clearer picture of what actually happened is emerging. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reports.
All weekend, headlines described Kentucky Catholic students as mocking and jeering this Native American man. But now Nick Sandman, a junior at Covington Catholic High School in Kentucky, tells his side of the story. In a statement, he says, "I believe that by remaining motionless and calm, I was helping to diffuse the situation. I realized everyone had cameras and that perhaps a group of adults was trying to provoke a group of teenagers into a larger conflict. I said a silent prayer that the situation would not get out of hand." Earlier, members of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement taunted the group who were attending the March for Life near the Lincoln Memorial.
Get rid of lice! Get rid of lice season!
They yelled racial slurs and insults at the students.
You worship blasphemy!
Sandman says the kids responded with school cheers. He writes, "Our chants were loud because we wanted to drown out the hateful comments that were being shouted at us by the protesters." 64-year-old Native American elder Nathan Phillips says he felt compelled to get involved. Phillips says he began singing and playing his drum to diffuse tension.
I realized I had put myself in a really dangerous situation, you know. It's like, here's a group of people who were angry at somebody else, and I put myself in front of that.
At first, the Covington Catholic Diocese and school condemned the students' actions and threatened the possibility of expulsion. But some are backtracking. CNN's Essie Cupp apologized for reacting too quickly to the first video. And Professor Robert George of Princeton, and prominent Catholic voice, says he jumped the gun and was unjust. Wyatt?
Jason, I understand lawmakers also entered this debate as well.
That's right. Representative Deb Haaland, a Native American Democrat, says the students displayed blatant hate. But Republican Thomas Massey represents Covington, and he defends the students. He urges everyone to watch all of the clips. Massey is asking if they would have remained as composed as the teens under the same circumstances.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. A Catholic priest in New Jersey has been arrested for sexual assault just 2 days after the state's clergy abuse hotline received a tip about him. The charges against 63-year-old Father Thomas Ganley date back to the 1990s. Officials say the victim was between the ages of 14 and 17. A religious sister and longtime faculty member at Sacred Heart Seminary in Detroit has resigned over sex abuse allegations. The case involves Sister Mary Finn and 2 young adult novices. The 84-year-old admits she misused her position of authority. For more on this story, including the statement from the leader of the Detroit Archdiocese, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. A priest in Argentina says the Vatican knew about the sexual misconduct of an Argentine bishop close to Pope Francis.
Es un sociópata, si te lo tengo que decir así literalmente.
Father Manzano describes Bishop Gustavo Zanqueta as a sociopath. Manzano says he reported Zanqueta's alleged abuse to the Vatican in 2015. The scandal is the latest to implicate Pope Francis, as he and the Catholic hierarchy as a whole face an unprecedented crisis of confidence. Alan Holdren is the EWTN Rome Bureau Chief. Alan, tell us what Bishop Zanqueta is accused of and what the Vatican allegedly knew.
Wyatt, Zanqueta is accused of taking inappropriate pictures, engaging in, quote, obscene behavior, and sexually harassing seminarians. At least 3 Argentine officials provided reports of the alleged abuse to the Vatican in both 2015 and 2017. The Pope allowed Zanqueta to resign quietly and then promoted him to a new number 2 position in one of the Vatican's most sensitive offices. The Vatican claimed allegations of sexual abuse were made only a few months ago. It's raised questions again about whether Pope Francis has turned a blind eye to the misconduct of one of his allies or dismissed allegations against them as ideological attacks. I asked the Vatican press office for comment today, and they referred me back to their previous statement from January the 4th.
Okay, so how does Pope Francis know Bishop Zanqueta? How do they know each other?
Wyatt, back in 2013, in one of his first Argentine bishop appointments as Pope, Francis named Zanqueta to the Diocese of Oran. It's a city of about 1,000 miles northwest of Buenos Aires. He knew Zanqueta very well. Zanqueta was the executive undersecretary of the Argentine Bishops' Conference, and the former Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio, now Pope Francis, headed that Bishops' Conference from 2005 to 2011. By all indications, why they were close. Manzano says that Bergoglio was actually Zanqueta's confessor and treated him as a spiritual son.
Okay, well, there's also Father Manzano, the priest in Argentina, who agreed to speak with the Associated Press on the record, but he's also defending Pope Francis' handling of the case, saying the Pope himself should be considered a victim of Zanchetta's manipulation.
That's right, Wyatt. Manzano's defending the Holy Father. He says that there was never any intent to hide anything on the Holy Father's part. He also says that there was never any intent to defend Zanchetta against anything. Zanchetta is now no longer working at the Vatican. He hasn't spoken to media. His successor back in the Diocese of Oran is also silent on the matter. He said that he wants to protect both the victims, potential victims, and also the former bishop's rights. And the investigation is continuing. In a statement, the Bishop of Oran there says that he's inviting anyone with any information to come forward and to say something in a testimony.
Some very disturbing allegations, and its investigation will continue to cover. Alan Holdren, EWTN Rome Bureau Chief. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Pope Francis puts one of his closest aides in charge of the Sistine Chapel Choir. Last year, the Vatican began a probe into alleged funding scandal. The choir, believed to be the world's oldest, canceled its 2018 summer tour of the United States without explanation. World Youth Day begins tomorrow in Panama. The event brings together young Catholics from around the world. These groups from Peru and Guatemala are already on site. Pope Francis arrives Wednesday. He'll be the first Latin American pope to visit Central America. Stay with EWTN for coverage all week. Several thousand pro-life supporters took to the streets yesterday in France. They were part of the 13th annual March for Life in Paris. Around 200,000 abortions are performed every year in the Catholic country. Organizers were also protesting a proposal for single women and lesbian couples to have access to medically assisted reproduction. Orthodox Christians celebrated the Feast of the Epiphany this Saturday. In Russia, the faithful waited in line to immerse themselves in freezing lakes and rivers. In Ukraine, bishops doused icons and the congregation with holy water. In Orthodox tradition, Epiphany marks the baptism of Christ in the River Jordan. Coming up, analysis of the president's proposal over the border wall and ending the partial government shutdown. And President Trump participates in a somber ceremony. Today is the official holiday honoring the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights icon and Christian minister was born on January 15, 1929. The federal law creating the holiday in King's honor was passed in 1983 and was observed for the first time in 1986. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. It's day 31 of the partial government shutdown, and there's still no end in sight. On Saturday, President Trump offered to temporarily extend protections for Dreamers, young immigrants brought to the country illegally as children, in exchange for $5.7 billion in border wall funding. Democrats say the three-year proposal doesn't go far enough. Matthew Cotnetti, editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon, joins me now. All right, Matthew, so Democrats shot down the latest offer by President Trump, even before he spoke, by the way. So Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi says she wants the government to reopen even before the immigration talks continue. So how do you think this whole shutdown is playing out in terms of public opinion?
Well, to date, the public seems to have blamed the president more for the shutdown, as well as some blame to the congressional Democrats. But now that President Trump has come out with an affirmative offer and to say, okay, I will compromise, I want money for the wall, but I'm also willing to legalize the Dreamers who were brought here as children, that kind of puts the Democrats in a difficult position. And I've noticed, despite the Democratic leadership dismissing Trump's offer out of hand, if you look at, say, Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, or even some of the House freshmen who were elected last year, they want to solve problems. And so I think Trump is splitting, maybe the beginning of a split between some of the Democratic rank and file and the Democratic leadership.
Yep, a lot of their constituents, of course, out of jobs and things like that. The president's proposal puts pressure on Democrats, of course, to compromise, but he's also gotten some pushback from conservatives, especially when it comes to the issue of DACA, and some people call it amnesty. I mean, how do you think this is going to play out with Republicans. Will some actually defect from President Trump as a result of this talk?
It's possible that one or two might vote against this compromise. I think it'd be very hard for the bulk of Republicans to vote against it. The fact is that some type of earned legalization for the Dreamers, maybe even that doesn't result in citizenship, but just a legal permanent residency in the United States, is very popular among people of both parties. And so if you were able to tie that with border wall funding, I think that's a compromise a lot of Republicans and some Democrats would welcome.
Okay. I want to switch gears here and talk about the BuzzFeed report that President Trump directed his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, to lie to Congress about the timing of talks on a proposed Trump project in Russia. Now, as you know, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office has refuted the story. President Trump has called the piece a disgrace to journalism. What do you think this does to BuzzFeed's credibility moving forward, or any media organization that tackles this kind of story?
Well, I think it damages the media's credibility. BuzzFeed, of course, is standing by the story, which is quite unusual because you have this huge discrepancy between what the special counsel's office is saying and what BuzzFeed.com is saying. Of course, all of us are waiting for that Mueller report, you know, and that's what's going to matter. I think Washington is kind of driving itself crazy in anticipation. And so you're able to cite these sources who are telling you what they saw, right? Yeah. And you run with it. As an editor, I would want to see the documents, right? I wouldn't be so willing to rely on sources who are saying, well, I've heard this or I've seen this.
Okay. One other, switching gears again, I want to turn to Friday's March for Life and ask you about that, because the mainstream media's coverage, or lack thereof, because according to the Media Research Center, between last Wednesday morning and Saturday evening, the morning and evening newscasts of the main networks ABC, CBS, and NBC collectively covered the March for Life for 58 seconds, and then the Women's March for 14 minutes and 26 seconds. So what do you think this says about the mainstream media's bias in terms of the pro-life message?
Well, I think it says there is bias, and it's massive, and the mainstream media ignores the pro-life cause and devotes very little attention to it, and this puts pro-life voters and activists in a difficult position, and so they have to find ways to make their case directly to the public through social media and organization. Well, the one thing that you always see from the March for Life that's always inspiring is the young people that attend, and that's, I think, a sign of hope.
Okay, very good. Matthew Cottonetti, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Free Beacon, thanks so much for your analysis.
Thank you.
A landmark Air Force chapel at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado is suffering from leaks and corrosion. The Academy has drawn up an ambitious restoration project, costing anywhere between $25 to $100 million. The 17 gleaming spires that form the jagged exterior walls resemble rows of jet fighter wings taking aim at the sky. The project could take up to 4 years to complete. President Trump pays his respects to the remains of 4 Americans killed last week in Syria. The dignified transfer ceremonies were held Saturday at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. Here, the president salutes the coffin of 42-year-old Scott Wirtz. 2 U.S. soldiers and 2 contractors were killed in a suicide bomb attack in Syria. ISIS claimed responsibility. Up next, why much of the world was gazing at the sky late last night. And Pope Francis has a new smartphone app. A rare lunar eclipse captured the attention of sky gazers late Sunday night into Monday morning. The phenomenon is known as a super blood wolf moon. Most of the world was able to catch the moon from the U.S. to Africa and Asia. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Closer examination of video is giving greater context to the now viral moment between students from a Kentucky Catholic school and a Native American veteran. Here we see members of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement taunting a group near the Lincoln Memorial. They also yelled insults and racial slurs at the students. Join me now by Skype from Los Angeles for more analysis is Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire, and he's the host of The Michael Knowles Show. So Michael, we now know the video only shows one part of what was going on. What responsibility does the media have in this controversy?
Well, falsehood flies, and then the truth comes limping along after it. The media contrived this out of whole cloth. This was a fictional narrative that was intentionally pushed by many figures in the media. And I'm sorry to say, many conservative pundits fell along with this. They bought the narrative hook, line, and sinker without any of the facts without any additional video. They just bought into it. And I'm also sorry to say, many corners of the Catholic Church did this as well. The Diocese of Covington sent out a statement immediately condemning the students, threatening them with expulsion. Priests like Father James Martin condemned the students immediately without context. Archbishop Joseph Kurtz, the same thing. They all rushed to condemn. And then when that truth limped along the next morning, with video totally exonerating the students, showing that they were really the only adults in the room. They were standing there, not doing anything, minding their own business. They were targeted by this Native American activist who marched right up to them, banged a drum in the kid's face, and that young man didn't move. He wasn't aggressive. He just stood there with a bemused look on his face.
Well,
when the truth limped along, unfortunately, many of those people will not apologize, even still.
Michael, some of these kids were wearing the red MAGA hats and they were attending, of course, the March for Life. What role do you think those two factors had to play in the firestorm, if any?
Well, that is the entire story. The entire story here is bigotry and prejudice, but not bigotry against African Americans or Native Americans. It was bigotry against these high school students. They were wearing a hat that said, "Make America Great Again." This has been a presidential slogan since at least the 1980s, and actually even probably a little earlier than that. And these Black Israelites, which is a black supremacist group called a hate group even by the Southern Poverty Law Center, they were screaming insults that I cannot repeat on television at these kids. And then this Native American activist got up into his face, banged his drum in his face, and the kids there were targeted because of their political views. And then by the media, they were targeted because it was simply assumed that anybody who would support the president or wear a hat that says "Make America Great Again" must be a bigot and a monster. And now that we've seen the full video, we see that it was not only the prejudices of those people at the event targeting the kids, but it was the prejudices and biases of all of the mainstream media, many pundits, and as I've said, I'm sorry to say, many corners of the Catholic Church who still have not apologized to those kids.
Okay, so I want to switch gears here because Ben Shapiro, who spoke at the March for Life and who you work with at the Daily Wire, lost 2 sponsors over his comments about baby Hitler. He said, quote, "The truth is no pro-life person would kill baby Hitler. Baby Hitler was a baby." Now, I was there when I heard him make these comments, but could you put this into context for us?
I certainly can, because the sponsors sponsor my show as well. So I received that text message when one of our sponsors dropped. And if I have to lose a sponsor to make the claim that I don't want to murder babies, I'm more than happy to do that. Obviously, what Ben said at the event, he was answering a question which said, hypothetical, if you could go back in time, would you kill baby Hitler? And he said, baby Hitler is a baby. We shouldn't be killing people for crimes that they haven't committed. Nobody would want to do that. Of course, he was right. This was another media drive-by hit job where they took a little tiny clip of this and they used just the phrase baby Hitler and made this into a total controversy. There were probably 50 people on social media who were actually calling the sponsors. But this is what they do time and time again. This activist left, which does not want you to know about the March for Life, doesn't want you to know about how young, how gigantic this event is, that people are going out there to defend the unborn. They don't want you to hear about any of that. They want to hear some stupid story about an aside comment about baby Hitler, and that's all that they will cover. It's the same thing with those young men from Covington High School. They were there to support the March for Life because pro-life is to use their phrase, the right side of history. They have no defense of abortion, so they have to attack the people who are defending life.
Right. Well, I can tell you here at EWTN, of course, I'm sure you guys as well will continue to cover all of the pro-life angles and, of course, all the positives about the March for Life. Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire and host of the Michael Knowles Show, thank you so much for talking with us.
Wyatt, good to see you.
And finally tonight, during his weekly address yesterday at the Vatican, Pope Francis pulled out his iPad. He had a good reason.
Voi giovani a scaricare l'app Click to Pray.
The Holy Father was demonstrating the Vatican's new prayer app. Click to Pray features 3 sections: devotionals with the Pope, daily prayer, and one where users can submit a prayer petition to the entire network. The app is free and is available on your phone's app store. And who knows, maybe if you add a prayer intention, maybe the Pope just might see it. And with that, we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.